Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiv Narottam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Didye Nashtiprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhagavati Naistiki. So we are continuing our discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 29, Talks between Narad and King Prachin Barhi, text number 55 onwards. So Narad Muni is further speaking to King Prachin Barhi. Sattvam vichakshya mrig chestitam atmano anantash chittam niyachya hridi karna dhunim chatya chitte jayam ganashrama sattam youth gatam Prinihi Hansa Sharanam Viram Kramena. My dear king, just try to understand the allegorical position of the deer. Be fully conscious of yourself and give up the pleasure of hearing about promotion to heavenly planets by fruitive activity. Give up household life, which is full of sex, as well as stories about such things. And take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the mercy of the liberated souls. In this way, please give up your attraction for material existence. In one of the songs, Srila Narottam Das Thakur writes, Karma Kanda, Jnana Kanda, Kevala Vishera Bhanda. Fruitive activities and mental speculation are simply cups of poison. Whoever drinks of them, thinking them to be nectar, must struggle very hard, life after life, in different types of bodies. Such a person eats all kinds of nonsense and becomes condemned by his activities of so-called sense enjoyment. So this living in the material world in a material way, it's condemned everywhere. We are thinking that I'm making progress, I'm materially very sound, financially very sound, or physically very sound. It's all according to this. Such a person eats all kinds of nonsense and becomes condemned by his activities of so-called sense enjoyment. And this kind of pleasure we'll read later on, I believe in 5th canto, it comes, story of Rishabdeva. And he says this kind of enjoyment is even available to dogs and hogs. People are generally enamored of the fruitive results of worldly activity and mental speculation. They generally desire to be promoted to heavenly planets, merge into the existence of Brahman, or keep themselves in the midst of family life, enchanted by the pleasure of the tongue and genitals. The great sage Narad clearly instructs King Barishma not to remain his entire life in the Grihastha ashram. Being in the Grihastha ashram means being under the control of one's wife. One has to give up all this and put himself into the ashram of the Paramhansa. That is, put himself under the control of the spiritual master. The Paramhansa ashram is the ashram of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, under whom the spiritual master has taken shelter. The symptoms of the bona fide spiritual master are stated in Srimad Bhagavatam. That any person who is seriously desirous of achieving real happiness must seek out a bona fide spiritual master and take shelter of him by initiation. The qualification of a spiritual master is that he must have realized the conclusion of the scriptures by deliberation and arguments, and thus be able to convince others of these conclusions. Such great personalities who have taken complete shelter of the Supreme Godhead, leaving aside all material considerations, are to be understood as bona fide spiritual masters. So they have realized the conclusion of the scriptures by deliberation and arguments. That's obviously one of the qualifications and very important qualification of a bona fide spiritual master. And they have taken complete shelter of the Supreme Godhead, leaving aside all material considerations. So realization of the conclusion of the scriptures cannot happen if one does not come in a proper bona fide parampara. Otherwise, we'll be on the mental platform thinking of this could mean this and this could mean that. And one has to take complete shelter of Krishna, leaving aside all material considerations. So that is a person one should follow. And here it is said, like Prabhupada is also explaining, that one should not remain always in a grihasthashram, should try to leave it and take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. A Paramhansa is one who has taken shelter of the Parabrahman, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If one takes shelter of the Paramhansa spiritual master, gradually through training and instruction, he will become detached from worldly life and ultimately return home back to Godhead. The particular mention of Anganashramam and Asattam Yutha Gatham is very interesting. The whole world is in the clutches of Maya, being controlled by women. Not only is one controlled by the women who is one's wife, but one is also controlled by so many sex literatures. That is a cause of one's being entangled in the material world. One cannot give up this abominable association through one's own effort. But if one takes shelter of a bona fide spiritual master who's a Paramhansa, he will gradually be elevated to the platform of spiritual life. So as I said, it's a very gradual process. It depends upon how surrendered we are. But to make progress, it takes time. It takes time. And to get out of this entanglement or the attraction towards opposite sex, again, that is, in a way, that is the last snare of Maya. And it takes time. So one has to just keep on treading on this path of bhakti, and slowly, by mercy of Krishna, by mercy of Guru, mercy of Guru Parampara, Gaurnitai, one can make steady progress. But at the same time, one has to be careful, very, very careful. The pleasing words of the Vedas that inspire one to elevate oneself to the heavenly planets or merge into the existence of the Supreme are for the less intelligent, who are described in Bhagavad Gita as Maya Prita Jnana, those whose knowledge is taken away by the illusory energy. Real knowledge means understanding the miserable condition of material life. One should take shelter of a bona fide liberated soul, the spiritual master, and gradually elevate himself to the spiritual platform, and thus becomes detached from the material world. So this was a process. One should take shelter of a bona fide liberated soul and gradually elevate himself to the spiritual platform. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Hansa Sharanam refers to the cottage in which saintly persons live. Generally, a saintly person lives in a remote place in the forest or in a humble cottage. However, we should note that the times have changed. It may be beneficial for a saintly person's own interest to go to the forest and live in a cottage. But if one becomes a preacher, especially in Western countries, he has to invite many classes of men who are accustomed to living in comfortable apartments. Therefore, in this age, a saintly person has to make proper arrangements to receive people and attract them to the message of Krishna consciousness. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur perhaps for the first time introduced motor cars and palatial buildings for the residence of saintly persons just to attract the general public in big cities. So Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he was living in Calcutta, and there was a Gaudiya Math that he has prepared in Bagh Bazaar, and he had a car at that time. That was 1920s or early 30s, late 20s or early 30s, sometime that time. And they were Prabhupada said there were only maybe 5 or 6 cars, or maybe 10 cars altogether in the whole city of Calcutta. And Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj had one. And at that time, the society was so strict, so, rigid, especially when it came to people, how the sannyasis should behave under British occupation. But Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj, he was a line guru. He's called Sima Guru. He used to go in motor cars. He used to wear stitched clothes. Normally, sannyasis are not supposed to wear stitched clothes. He used to wear shoes. So many things he did. But point was, and living in palatial buildings. Of course, that there was beautiful temple. One of his disciples, who was a very rich person, he had built the temple, and he had put marble everywhere in the temple. That was in Bagh Bazaar. And Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj and his disciples, they were living there, serving the deities and preaching. Of course, his main idea was to preach. His point was, if we have better, bigger facilities, then more people and people from all walks of life, even British, would come and listen to us. If we just go live in a hut in a forest, who's going to come and listen? How are we going to preach? But at the same time, he himself was not at all attached to any of the facilities. And he expected the same from his followers. Because in one place, he saw that his disciples, they were having some disagreements over which room he would take or which room the other person would take. And Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj, if it is possible, I would just take off all the marble from this building and sell it off and print books. So the idea is not the big buildings are bad. Idea is not that the big cars are bad. Idea is attachment. And how we are attached. Generally, we try to convince others by saying, oh, I'm not attached to it. I'm just attached to service of Krishna. So I'm using these instruments or these facilities in the service of Krishna. Well, we can convince others, or in a way we can cheat others as long as we want to. But we cannot cheat Krishna. And our attachment to these facilities will be apparent or will be obvious if Krishna takes away those facilities from us. And Krishna will definitely do that just to test us. And the facilities could be in the terms of followers, money, beauty, or knowledge, or any of these big facilities, cars, temples, position. If Krishna takes it away, how surrendered we still would be how grateful we still would be, how loving we still would be towards Krishna and the devotees at the same time. That is a test. So this is what Prabhupada is saying. In this age, people are not going to search out a saint in the forest. So the saints and sages have to come to the big cities to make arrangements to receive the people in general who are accustomed to modern amenities of material life. Gradually, such persons will learn that palatial buildings or comfortable apartments are not at all necessary. The real necessity is to become free from material bondage in whatever way possible. Actually, in Delhi, we used to have our classes in that robotics show, and it was a wonderful facility with nice seating and air conditioning and all that. And we used to conduct seminars there as well, along with the regular classes. And one of the seminars, I won't take the name. Maybe you know, maybe you don't know. It's okay. Name is not important. So one of the devotee, she came with her husband, and her husband was not very congenial or well-wisher of the woman, but Mataji pushed him. So he came and he was like, why are you using such wonderful facilities? Air conditioned, and that robotic show was really because it was soundproof, because there was a show inside. And then he would say, oh, you have so much of money, I won't pay for the seminar. so we had to just admit him. But they don't understand. We don't understand. If we just have a simple room with no facilities and the mosquitoes are biting and there is no proper light or fan, how many people will come and listen, sit and listen? Especially when we are used to these kind of facilities. Of course, in the forest where Naimisharanya, 88,000 sages are sitting down, they're not used to these kind of facilities. So it's okay. It's easy for them to sit in the forest and listen to Sut Goswami. Or all the sages in the assembly of Shukdev Goswami. And the King Parikshit also, he left everything to listen to Shukdev Goswami. But we are not at that stage. Normally, when we go for yatra, that is a different story. That's a temporary setting. So some austerity happens. But regularly, we won't be able to perform. The point is to listen. Point is to hear Krishna Katha. Point is to chant properly, do our services properly. But at the same time, let's not get attached to those facilities. Prabhupada says the real necessity is to become free from material bondage in whatever way possible, according to the orders of Srila Rupa Goswami. When one is not attached to anything, but at the same time accepts everything in relation to Krishna, one is rightly situated above possessiveness. With that, we have to see ourselves. We cannot explain or convince others or justify our possessiveness. That we have to see. One should not be attached to material opulence, but material opulence may be accepted in the Krishna consciousness movement to facilitate the propagation of the movement. In other words, material opulence may be accepted as yukta vairagya, that is for renunciation. Text 56. Raja Vacha Shrutam Anavikshitam Brahman Bhagwan Yadavashit Netat Jananti Upadhyaya Kimna Bruyur Vidur Yadi. The king replied, my dear Brahman, whatever you have said, I have heard with great attention. And considering all of it, have come to the conclusion that the acharyas, teachers, who engaged in fruitive activity did not know this confidential knowledge. If they were aware of it, why did they not explain it to me? Actually, the so-called teachers or leaders of material society do not really know the goal of life. They are described in Bhagavad Gita as Mayaya Pritagyana. They appear to be very learned scholars, but actually the influence of the illusory energy has taken away their knowledge. Real knowledge means searching out Krishna. All Vedic knowledge is meant for searching out Krishna, because Krishna is a source or origin of everything. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, I am the source of the demigods. Thus Krishna is the origin and beginning of all demigods, including Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and all others. The Vedic ritualistic ceremonies are concerned with satisfying different demigods. But unless one is very advanced, he cannot understand that the original personality is Sri Krishna. So many people will teach differently how to perform fruitive activity. And this is what the King Rachin Bharishth is saying. Because he is now enlightened, he's saying, they all told me only thing about fruitive activities, and that's what I did. So probably they didn't know about this confidential knowledge. After hearing the instructions of Narad, King Barhishman came to his senses. The real goal of life is to attain devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The king therefore decided to reject the so-called priestly orders that simply engage their followers in the ritualistic ceremonies without even giving effective instructions about the goal of life. At the present moment, the churches, temples, and mosques all over the world are not attracting people because foolish priests cannot elevate their followers to the platform of knowledge. Because the people themselves, they don't know. Somehow or other, they have come to that position of priesthood, but they themselves do not know the real message of the Lord, or the real meaning of the message of the Lord, and how to engage, how to lead their followers in the right process. Not being aware of the real goal of life, they simply keep their congregations in ignorance. Consequently, those who are well educated have become uninterested in the ritualistic ceremonies. At the same time, they are not benefited with real knowledge. This Krishna consciousness movement is therefore very important for the enlightenment of all classes. Following in the footsteps of Maharaj Varishman, everyone should take advantage of this Krishna consciousness movement and abandon the stereotyped ritualistic ceremonies that go under the garb of so many religions. The Goswamis from the very beginning differed from the priestly class that was engaged in ritualistic ceremonies. Indeed, Srila Sanatana Goswami compiled his Hari Bhakti Vilas for the guidance of the Vaishnavas. The Vaishnavas, not caring for the lifeless activities of the priestly classes, take to full Krishna consciousness and become perfect in this very life. That is described in the previous verse as Paramhansa Sharanam, taking shelter of the Paramhansa, the liberated soul, and becoming successful in this life. And these are Prabhupada's purpose, very heavy. And now he is hammering on the priestly class, Brahmins. And actually, this was also our experience when we went to this South India Yatra. Beautiful, beautiful temples there. Wonderful architecture and elaborate deity worship. But no kirtan, no classes going on in any of those temples. And in one temple we went to, I forgot where it was, because Prabhupada's mercy, ISKCON is a household name, or everybody knows of ISKCON. And we went to that temple. The pujaris requested us, why don't you do some kirtan here? You're known for your kirtans. And we had wonderful kirtan. And also had kirtan in in the courtyard of one Lord Shiva temple. I forgot the name of that temple. Radha Prabhu would know. Very important temple, very old. And we had wonderful kirtan. And our bus also had broken down. So we had extra long kirtan over there. But this is what is missing in all these beautiful temples. Kirtan. And the classes, giving the real message of the scripture.
That was Big Temple Tanjore, Prabhu.
Tanjore, yes, thank you.
Big Temple Tanjore on the eve of New Year, and it is unforgettable.
Yeah. We really had fun in that trip. So, but the point is, the knowledge is not given in any of the temples. And in churches also here in America or all over Europe, beautiful, beautiful churches. And churches all over the place, not just maybe a distant village. Everywhere there are churches. But no classes, no information is given out. They hardly have ceremonies on Sundays, and not too many people go on Sundays. They're supposed to have ceremony or ceremonies also, yeah, we can say every Wednesday also. But again, how many people go? Good thing is here in America, at least they give so much of donation to the churches. The churches are being built very nicely, very elaborate, very magnificent churches. For the operation and maintenance, lots of money is required. People give lots of donation, but no knowledge is given out properly. So that is what is missing. And this is what Prabhupada is saying, lifeless activities of the priestly classes. This is what they are doing. And this is not what scriptures are for. This is not what religion is for. And same thing in mosque or gurdwaras. Gurdwaras, at least some Shabad Kirtan goes on, which is good, but no classes. Nobody is there to teach the message of Guru Nanak Dev or Guru Granth Sahib. And yes, the mood of service is there, the mood of, and wonderful service they do. I mean, you go to any Gurdwara, they're very spick and span, clean. They're doing so much of service. And langar and food distribution is going on. But we need to teach the scriptures to the people. That is what is missing. And this is what Prabhupada's, one of the major contributions. He gave books and he established this system of classes, morning and evening classes also. So his point was morning, do the morning program, have Bhagavatam class, and whole day do the service. In the evening, have Bhagavad Gita class, and then have prasadam, and before you go to bed, read Krishna book. So we know what the scriptures are talking about. Sanchayo atra tu me vipra sanchinnastat krito maham rishyo api hi muyanti yatra na indriya vrittaya. My dear Brahman, there are contradictions between your instructions and those of my spiritual teachers who engage me in fruitive activities. I now can understand the distinction between devotional service, knowledge, and renunciation. I had some doubts about them, but you have now very kindly dissipated all these doubts. I can now understand how even the great sages are bewildered by the real purpose of life. Of course, there is no question of sense gratification. King Barishman was engaged in different types of sacrifice for elevation to the heavenly planets. People generally are attracted by these activities, and very rarely is a person attracted to devotional service, as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu confirms. Unless one is very, very fortunate, he does not take to devotional service. Even the so-called Vedic scholars are bewildered by devotional service. They are generally attracted to the rituals for sense gratification. In devotional service, there is no sense gratification, but only transcendental loving service to the Lord. Consequently, the so-called priests engaged in sense gratification do not very much like devotional service. The Brahmins, the priests, have been against this Krishna consciousness movement since it began with Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu started this movement, the priestly class lodged complaints to Qazi, the magistrate of the Mohammedan government. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had to lead a civil disobedience movement against the propaganda of the so-called followers of Vedic principles. These people are described as karma jada smartas, which indicates that they are priests engaged in ritualistic ceremonies. It is stated that such people become bewildered. To save oneself from the hands of these karma jada smartas, one should strictly follow the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sarvadharman parityaja, abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. Of course, these priestly class is also important. They are Brahmins. They are important. And because at least they are engaging people in the service of the Lord. But better than Brahmins are the Vaishnavas, who are engaging people properly in the service of the Lord, not through ritualistic ceremonies, but engaging them in devotional service that pleases the Lord. So the priestly class, if they also study scriptures and give out the proper message, great. That's a perfection of life. But otherwise, they're also doing a great job. But it's always better to engage people in devotional service. Karmanyaravateyena puman ihi vihayatam amutranyena dehena jushtani yadashante. The results of whatever a living entity does in this life are enjoyed in the next life. A person generally does not know how one body is linked with another body. How is it possible that one suffers or enjoys the results of activities in this body and yet another body in next life? This is a question the king wants Narad Muni to answer. How may one have a human body in this life and not have a human body in the next? Even great philosophers and scientists cannot account for the transfer of karma from one body to another. As we experience, every individual soul has an individual body, and one person's activities or one body's activities are not enjoyed or suffered by another body or another person. The question is how the activities of one body are suffered or enjoyed in the next. Because King Prachin Bharishat was told the story of King Puranjan, who became a woman in the next life. So he was confused. How is it possible? Iti veda vidam vada shruyate tatra tatra karma yat kriyate proktam paroksham na prakashate. The expert knowers of the Vedic conclusions say that one enjoys or suffers the results of his past activities. But practically it is seen that the body that performed the work in the last birth is already lost. So how is it possible to enjoy or suffer the reactions of that work in a different body? And this question, generally people ask this question. Atheists want evidence for the resultant actions of past activities. Therefore they ask, where is the proof that I am suffering or enjoying the resultant actions of past karma? They have no idea how the subtle body carries the results of the present body's actions down to the next gross body. The present body may be finished grossly, but the subtle body is not finished. It carries the soul to the next body. Actually, the gross body is dependent on the subtle body. Therefore, the next gross body must suffer and enjoy according to the subtle body. The soul is carried by the subtle body continuously until liberated from gross material bondage. So that's how it goes. So Narad Muni is going to explain. Narad Vacha. Yena va rabate karma tena va mutra tatvaman bhunkte hi avyavdhanena lingena manasa swayam. The great sage Narad continued. The living entity acts in a gross body in this life. This body is forced to act by the subtle body, composed of mind, intelligence, and ego. After the gross body is lost, the subtle body is still there to enjoy or suffer. Thus, there is no change. The living entity has two kinds of body, the subtle body and the gross body. Actually, he enjoys through the subtle body, which is composed of mind, intelligence, and ego. The gross body is the instrumental outer covering. When the gross body is lost or when it dies, the root of the gross body, the mind, intelligence, and ego continues and brings about another gross body. Although the gross bodies apparently change, the real root of the gross body, the subtle body of mind, intelligence, and ego is always there. The subtle body's activities, be they pious or impious, create another situation for the living entity to enjoy or suffer in the next gross body. Thus, the subtle body continues, whereas the gross body change one after another. So this is how transmigration of soul happens. Since modern scientists and philosophers are too materialistic, and since their knowledge is taken away by the illusory energy, they cannot explain how the gross body is changing. The materialistic philosopher Darwin has tried to study the changes of the gross body, but because he had no knowledge of either the subtle body or the soul, he could not clearly explain how the evolutionary process is going on. One may change the gross body, but he works in the subtle body. People cannot understand the activities of the subtle body, and consequently, they're bewildered as to how the actions of one gross body affect another gross body. The activities of the subtle body are also guided by the super soul. Sarvasya chaham ridhi sannivishto. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. Because the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as Super Soul, is always guiding the individual soul, the individual soul always knows how to act according to the reactions of his past karma. In other words, the Super Soul reminds him to act in such a way. Therefore, although there is apparently a change in the gross body, there is a continuation between the lives of an individual soul. So we carry on, we get from this human body, we can go into the body of an animal. Suppose we get the next body of a dog, then we act like a dog. So who teaches the soul to act like a dog? So the subtle body, the mind, intelligence, soul, ego, takes the shape of a dog, and the gross body becomes a dog. But the super soul is there to remind that soul to act like a dog. And in fact, every time when we sleep at night, when we sleep at night, we forget who we are, actually. At night in the dream, we might think of some other bodies that we might have had previously, in some previous lifetime, and activities that we did. But we forget who we are. As soon as we wake up, The super soul reminds us, oh, you're a housewife, or you're a computer engineer, or you're this or that, or you're a businessman, and this is your house, this is your wife, these are your children, and this is your car, and this is how you drive the car, this is where where you work, and this is how you go. Otherwise, we forget everything when we sleep at night. So that is, we call it what? Short-term memory loss. What if it becomes long-term memory loss? We wake up in the morning and we forget who we are. We forget who our wife is. We say, oh, Mataji, who are you? I've never seen you before. Definitely, there'll be very much, plenty of fight in the house. But if we forget everything, who we are, and Krishna can do that. He says, from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. Then what will happen to us? Even if we are a big manager or a big entrepreneur, we are big industrialists, we forget who we are. Then what are we worth? Nothing. We forget how to read and write. We cannot even write our name or put our signature. Then we cannot even withdraw money. We are worth nothing. We might know big philosophy. We have taken so many degrees, PhDs, and this or that. If we forget all the knowledge, what we are worth? Nothing. But this is only His mercy. He still reminds us every morning who we are or how we are supposed to act. Just imagine if Prime Minister Modi tomorrow morning he gets up and he forgets he is Prime Minister. What will happen? Big chaos. And sometimes if somebody is very sinful, Krishna does that. He puts that person in coma. Coma means it's not a full stop, not the end of the sentence, but it's not the continuation of sentence either. So he's in middle. It's not end and it's not continuation. That's why it's called coma. So everything goes on by the mercy of the Lord. Nothing else is there in the world. Nothing. And same thing, actually, this whole material world, that's why it's called made of illusion. Because we are sleeping. We are sleeping, we are unaware of our real identity. Like Prabhupada had also explained this someplace. In the dream, we see different bodies. We imagine ourselves having some other body and we do some activities. And then we wake up and we come to our real knowledge. But our stay here in the material world is also like a dream. We are actually belong to the spiritual world. We are here in some body and then we lose this body, take another body, then we act, we fight, we have so many emotions and dialogues and drama and this or that. And then we again go through that for another 80, 90, 100 some years. Then another body, then another body. But this is all dream. Reality is there because it all exists. But otherwise, nothing belongs. We don't belong here. So in that way, it's all illusion. And either Krishna comes or he sends his representative to remind us, to wake us up. So that we wake up and go to the real home, to the real position of ours in the spiritual world. That is a job of spiritual master. And this is what Krishna wants from all of us. Come back to me, he says. Come back. Spiritual world, such a nice place. Why are you suffering in a place of illusion? Thinking this is my permanent place. That's why this is Maya Aparita Jnana. Knowledge is taken away by Maya. Aparit means aparan, comes from word aparan, means kidnapped by Maya, forcibly taken away by Maya. But while living in this illusory world, we make so many plans to stay here forever, to enjoy here forever. And that is what very frustrating. Not frustrating, but it's very laughable for Krishna. Look at their plans. Nonsense. Shayanam imam utsrijya shvasantam purusho yatha karmatmani ahitam te tadrishi netrenva. The living entity, while dreaming, gives up the actual living body. Through the activities of his mind and intelligence, he acts in another body, either as a god or a dog. Wow, is it used by Narad Muni or Prabhupada? It's not in the shloka. Okay, so Prabhupada used that. After giving up this gross body, the living entity enters either an animal body or a demigod's body on this planet or on another planet. He thus enjoys the results of the actions of his past life. Although the root of distress and happiness is the mind, intelligence, and ego, a gross body is still required as an instrument for enjoyment. The gross body may change, but the subtle body continues to act. Unless a living entity gets another gross body, he will have to continue in a subtle body or a ghostly body. One becomes a ghost when a subtle body acts without the help of the instrumental gross body. As stated in this verse, Shayanam imam utsrijya shvasantam. The gross body may lie on a bed and rest, and even though the machinery of the gross body is working, the living entity may leave, go into a dream, and return to the gross body. When he returns to the body, he forgets his dream. Similarly, when the living entity takes on another gross body, he forgets the present gross body. Conclusion is that the subtle body, mind, intelligence, and ego creates an atmosphere with desires and ambitions that the living entity enjoys in the subtle body. Actually, the living entity is in the subtle body, even though the gross body apparently changes, and even though he inhabits the gross body on various planets. But we identify ourselves with the gross body because the subtle body has become like that. And here it is not mentioned, but in as we know from Lord Kapil Dev's instructions, he said the subtle body is made of 4 elements: mind, intelligence, false ego, and consciousness, impure consciousness. So the consciousness actually makes this whole thing, I'm this body. Actually, the living entity is in the subtle. All the activities performed by the living entity in the subtle body are called illusory because they are not permanent. Liberation means getting out of the clutches of the subtle body. Liberation from the gross body simply involves the transmigration of the soul from one gross body to another. When the mind is educated in Krishna consciousness or higher consciousness, in the mode of goodness, one is transferred either to the upper heavenly planets or to the spiritual world, the Vaikuntha planets. One therefore has to change his consciousness by cultivating knowledge received from Vedic instructions from the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the disciplic succession. If we train the subtle body in this life by always thinking about Krishna, we'll transfer to Krishna Loka after leaving the gross body. This is confirmed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. Thus, the change of the gross body is not very important, but the change of the subtle body is important. The Krishna consciousness movement is educating people to enlighten the subtle body. The perfect example in this regard is Ambarish Maharaj, who always engaged his mind on the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Savai Mana Krishna Padara Vindayo. Similarly, in this life, we all should always fix our mind on the lotus feet of Krishna, who is present in his Archa Vigraha, the incarnation of the deity in the temple. We should always engage in his worship. If we engage our speech in describing the activities of the Lord, and our ears in hearing about his pastimes, and if we follow the regulative principles to keep the mind intact for advancing in Krishna consciousness, we shall certainly be elevated to the spiritual platform. Then at the time of death, the mind, intelligence, and ego will no longer be materially contaminated. The living entity is present, and the mind, intelligence, and ego are also present. When the mind, intelligence, and ego are purified, all the active senses of the living entity become spiritual. Thus, the living entity attains a Satchidananda form. The Supreme Lord is always in a Satchidananda form, but the living entity, all the part and parcel of the Lord, becomes materially contaminated when he desires to come to the material world for material enjoyment. The prescription for returning home back to Godhead is given by the Lord himself in Bhagavad Gita, Manmana Bhagavad Bhakto. Always think of me and become my devotee. Worship me and offer your homage unto me. Being completely absorbed in me, surely you will come to me. So the process is to spiritualize everything. Our activities, our hearing, our talking, our eating, everything should be spiritualized. Then slowly, the subtle body changes from material to spiritual. Or actually the material subtle body goes away and the spiritual body develops. And that is what Satchidananda form is. Thus the living entity attains is Satchidananda form. And that's what this whole process of Bhakti Yoga is all about. So anyway, we'll stop here. See anybody has any questions or comments?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Please accept my humble obeisances.
Hare Krishna, please accept mine.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji, for enlightening us. Actually, it was really amazing, Srila Prabhupada, how beautifully in every purport at the end, every purport, he made sure that we have to constantly engage our mind in consciousness no matter what. So that reminding us from every purport, no matter whatever is the subject. So this is one of the best thing I have realized, that Prabhupada made sure that I don't even forget it for a 1 second also.
Mm-hmm.
So
that is true, yeah.
Prabhuji. So is it possible to get Krishna consciousness purely without taking the shelter of a guru?
No. But taking shelter of a guru, I mean, for all practical purposes, we all have taken shelter of Srila Prabhupada through his instructions, through his books. Physical guru, that's up to you, who you want to take shelter of. But Prabhupada is our prime Shiksha Guru.
Yes, actually, I also heard that Prabhupada mentioned that one can never go back to the Godhead without taking the shelter of our Guru.
True, yeah, because see, exceptions are there. We don't talk in exceptions. But in general, yes, that's a process.
Okay.
But for like Prabhupada also mentioned in one of the script purports that whoever is following his books, we have taken shelter of Prabhupada. So that way we are on the safe side.
Okay, Prabhuji.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Mant. Any other question or comment? Okay, so we'll stop here. You all have a wonderful and safe day. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Jai Srila Prabhupada.